Welcome to the Safety Risk Success podcast with me, Christian Harris. How can the safety profession improve? This was the simple, perhaps not so simple as we'll find out, question that I asked as part of this Safety Roundtable discussion, and it's very much an open and interactive one. No presentations or slides or anything like me. An open question, a few prompts, and into the discussion we go. What was really interesting was that a couple of different schools of thought came out. One thinking internally, what can the profession do to change and improve? And one looking externally, how can we position ourselves? How can we engage? How can we influence? And then the question arises, how do we do those things at the same time? Or which one do we need to prioritize? And so on and so forth. A really engaging discussion. Thank you to everybody that took part. If you're listening to or watching this on the replay, then I'd love your comments. Share this on social media and give us, how do you think the safety profession can improve, or perhaps even must improve, needs to improve? Let us know your thoughts. Hope you enjoy this episode and see you on the other side of the credits for the roundtable discussion. Cheers.
Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with Christian Harris. We believe that proactive safety and risk management powers business performance. Each week we explore this theme, sharing guests, stories, insights, trends, hints and tips. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, and video versions are available on YouTube. But for now, let's join the conversation with Christian.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's Safety Roundtable session about how can the safety profession improve. It's the last of these roundtables for the calendar year, and I'm looking forward to a really interactive discussion with you all today. I haven't prepared huge amounts for this one, so hopefully people are feeling chatty that are joining us on the Zoom. And if you're following us along on LinkedIn or YouTube, then feel free to fire into the chat and I will do my best to monitor the feedback and any questions and comments and so on and so forth that come through as we go. So just quickly, if you've not come across the Safety Roundtable before, it's a fortnightly Zoom session and we cover a different topic every single time. Often it's me with a guest, or if not, then it'd be me talking about and introducing a topic like today, and then having a very much open, interactive and collaborative, and hopefully a value-added discussion. So do join us at these events as they come up, and do feel free to share and invite your colleagues along as well. So today, the topic is about how can the safety profession improve, and I'm very much hoping that people will have particular ideas about things they want to discuss in this arena. But I put together these 6 areas as potential talking points. And if you're joining me on the Zoom, just go into reactions, raise your hand and come up and we can have a chat about any of these points or anything else you want to say, anything you want to get off your chest, or anything you want to add to the discussion. If you're following us on LinkedIn or whatever it might be, then or you can obviously put something in the chat as well. But I'll be trying to monitor the chat as best I can. So these are the hello everybody from that's saying hello, by the way, on the chat from all around the world, which is great to see so many of you from joining us from different places. Hi Vedat on LinkedIn, who's following along. So yeah, these were some sort of subtopics, I suppose, that I thought might make interesting talking points. So what's the role of the safety professional? Innovation in safety, what's going on in terms of innovation? How are risk perceptions evolving? to what extent are we integrated with business objectives? How could we be better at doing that? Professional development, which I know is a topic that has come up a few times on the Safety Roundtable. Um, is the way that we're training and certifying people at the moment sufficient or not? And if not, what can we do differently? And public perception and advocacy. So what can we do, excuse me, to raise the profile of the safety profession and get more recognition? So hello, Steve, and thanks for joining. Steve, who was on the podcast last week. I hope you got some good feedback from that, Steve. I certainly did. Also about fire safety. And hi, Rodney from Ghana. And we've got Amy from Shakespeare's country, Stratford upon Avon, as well. Great to see you. So, where should we start with this? Does anybody have any thoughts on any of these topics or something else? Otherwise, I'm going to have to pick on somebody to get the discussion started.
I at the starting point, if you'd like,
Christian. Yeah, Steve, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Just for those of you on the meeting, my background is a training one, so my fire service one, and then subsequently training. And my MO when I turn up to a training event is to win over the hearts and minds of all those people on the course. And it's quite obvious to me you need to have a multi-layered approach to winning over hearts and minds. Some people are very, they've got open ears, they want to listen. Some people think, why do we have to do this? I think the health and safety profession is very stigmatized. It's only ever seen in a negative light, where it seems to inhibit things going forward. Why do we have to do that? But if you go back to the 70s and look at the amount of workplace deaths, then, compared to now, so many improvements have happened. I think that people need to have powerful training, immersive training, so they can realize that they can move from being unconscious of their incompetence, as I always talk about, to become very conscious. So I think training's key. But I also think we always talk about the carrot and the stick. Some people need the stick, some people need the carrot. But I just thought that would be a little bit of a point. I don't want to hog the limelight or anything, just to get us thinking about, training is key, having knowledge, and recognizing that there's a powerful role. One quick example is Rick Rescorla. Rick Rescorla was not a well-liked man in the World Trade Center. He ran that place like a military operation at Morgan Stanley after the terrorist atrocity in the early 90s. And then when 2001 happened, everybody realized what a powerful, a wonderful person he was in terms of his objectives, what he tried to achieve during those 10 years leading up to that. And people went, wow, they're so glad we had him on our team. But up until that point, he wasn't well liked because he was banging the drum all the time about health and safety. That's my little bit.
Thanks for that, Steve, and thank you for volunteering to be first, because I think sometimes it takes the first person to come up, and then that prompts the discussion. Phil, you got your hand up. I think you've got a response to that. I've got some thoughts as well on what Steve said.
I just want to start an argument straight away with Steve. So I'd really dislike the term training. Personally, I think as health and safety people, environmental health officers, or whatever we are within the risk environment, I think education is far better. Educators to look at things, critically think things, which is why in recent years I've very much moved away from thinking that training is the way forward. I think that the way to get better engagement, to be better health and safety professionals, is by saying, well, shouldn't we be really making this a degree level profession? Shouldn't we be encouraging that, to encourage people to research, to go back to the cliche of critical thinking? Because to me, it's more important the framework of understanding and researching and risk assessing is far better than unfortunately, far too many colleagues within the health and safety profession still just keep banging on quoting regs. And to me, I'm a senior health and safety professional. I couldn't quote the regs these days. If I want to quote them, I'll just Google it or chat GPT it. So I think to me, it's very important is that mindset and the language we use to start using the term education.
I'm going to agree.
Have a good argument. Don't
No,
agree.
I'm going
Have a good argument, Chris.
I'm going to agree but disagree. I'm going to agree but disagree. And Steve, feel free to come back in on this. I think that you have to meet people where they're at is one point. So I'm going to say one justification for the use of the word training, and I'm also going to use there's going to be something around the legal context here, where they're in the event of a claim or something or an incident, they're going to say, has this person had their training? So I think there's a reason why we might use that word training, but I'm not going to disagree that actually we could be doing more on this, and actually we do need to do more education. And I'm not going to disagree that some of the phraseology and stuff we use maybe does need a refresh, but I think there's probably some reasons why we do use that word.
I suppose I would just say I'm talking about health and safety professionals. I'm not talking about our operational teams when we're doing claims defensibility and working with our insurers. Very much health and safety professionals rather than, although personally I think if we did our job properly, we'd all should be made redundant and wouldn't need us. But hey, that's another discussion.
Phil, just to come back to Phil's comment there, I agree with what you say, and terminology is always a strange one. So, I mean, I would describe training as a process of imparting information and have that information land and have people act upon it. So educating, training, it's a terminology thing, but there's two aspects. I think Phil there was talking more about the profession of being a health and safety person. I totally agree with what you're saying. We need to up our game. What highly frustrates me in the world of fire, it's very, very woolly about training. Should have appropriate skills and experience. It's very woolly compared to something like first aid training, where it has to be you need some kind of accreditation there. So I mean, what does that look like? There's no criteria around. I get people contacting me saying, could you do 20 minutes of input on our inset day at the school? And I have other clients that want 8 hours of fire safety input. And actually both would deem to have ticked the box in terms of, yes, we've had some training, but it's so woolly in the legislation. It doesn't specify specific timeframes, like EFAW as an example, 6 contact hours. Fire training, there's no criteria on that. So for me, I get frustrated because anybody could crack on and tenuously link themselves to being a professional. So it is a frustration. But yeah, take your point, Phil.
I'm disappointed. I was up for a really good argument this dinner time.
I'm sure there'll be some things we can argue about in a minute. Andrew, you got your hand up.
There you go. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, first meeting. So great topic, actually, good input.
Thank you for joining us.
Cheers. I think elements, people are correct, the terminology, etc. varies. It depends who you talk to and what avenue they come from. And it all links back into your first box there, which was definition of the role. Because I spent many years in Canada now, and I'm back in the UK. And you'll have one person say, I'm a safety professional on there. And maybe they've done a 12-week course or whatever, and they say, I'm good at this now. And you'll also have people who say, oh, it's like boots on the ground. They'll argue the case for the person at the front line. But I don't think some people realize there's a whole plethora of skill levels and abilities required through the industry. So if you can define maybe the industry and the levels, a little bit like I'm an Irish member and I was in a meeting this morning, and it's that thing where they separate the levels to some degree with it's entry. There's more entry level and upwards to fellowship, I guess. Whereas the CRSP in Canada, they do it on a technical basis, and then they do it more on a broader basis. But because you work in so many industries and then so many skill sets required, I guess if you look at an example, if you're an occupational health and safety person, you will have a totally different skill set maybe sorry, gotta get rid of that. To what some others may require doing other stuff, like if you're in construction or you're oil and gas or business. I'm getting on in my years now, and I've worked in nearly every industry there is. I started out with a trade apprenticeship. I got a degree, and I got a bunch of qualifications in safety, and I've got some of the highest certification you can get in Canada. So some people are viewing it from a different perspective. You know, wherever you sit on that ladder, you're going to view it differently. And if we define those roles, then you can place the training or the education requirements next to those roles and the type of work you're going to provide. And then that would help the client in the industry because they'll know who to go to for X, Y, and Z services. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, no, yeah, thank you. Yeah. Out of interest, how do you perceive the, let's say, the standing of the safety profession in Canada versus in the UK?
I see similarities, just confusion over roles and abilities and who should be doing what. And there's an NCSO program in Canada which takes someone maybe who's been in a trade or just starting out, and they'll do a certain amount of courses with the local, what they call WCB authority, and that qualifies them as a national safety certificate for a construction officer. Then you'll have one for the manufacturing association, then you might have one for the hospitality association, and it's sort of a base level. But the problem is some of those people, what I found is they work at that level and they spend so long in the industry, they might spend 20 years just doing that. And they may do their own research and stuff, but it doesn't really quantify or qualify them to a third party on their abilities or their knowledge aspect of it. Because if you've done a degree, say, or a PhD, you'll encompass a lot more and have a broader understanding. You'll know what you don't know to some degree. Whereas if you're down here, you don't know what you don't know, and you may not have awareness that there's a whole aspect or a whole plethora of things behind what you're required to see. You know, if I don't know, confined space with full protection, you know, some people will just see a hole, but if you've actually done a lot more work and the research on it, there's a whole world of pain behind that you need to inch through to make sure you're safe at the end of it. Whereas someone just coming in will see, oh, just need breathing, I just need ventilation, I'm good. They won't understand maybe the engineering and the other aspects of it that you might require for that space. Try to give an example.
Yeah. No, thanks. Yeah, thanks, and thanks for coming along to the first one. Hopefully, see you at more of these coming up. Simon, you got your hand up.
Hi, Christian. Just to sort of keep on track with the question, how can we improve? And then somebody highlighted training. And I think there is a distinction between training and learning. I think there is. I mean, I'm an ex-station officer, Steve, so I get it. I get what you're saying. And what I will say is, I think we can learn from organisations. The way we did training is we didn't necessarily provide information. A lot of the firefighters knew the information. It was about giving them problems to solve, about when to use the knowledge. I run a training or learning, whatever you want to call it, organisation. And what I've realised over the years, particularly recently, is that a lot of the sessions we do, people know the stuff. And my job is to remind them through a discussion. So I use what's called the dialectic. Anyone who knows me, I'm interested in philosophy. And it's a series of questions and answers that we do as a group. Okay, so for example, I mean, we do asbestos training as a game. Who wants to be asbestos aware? And it's a series of questions that the group discuss. So I think often what we're doing when we're doing these interactions is that instead of giving people knowledge, because this, I think we have a misguided understanding of that knowledge equals action, because it doesn't. And so what I try and do is try and use interactive discussions wherever possible and fill the gaps. I also think sometimes training is reminding or elevating the importance of something they already know, whether that's learning or education, and actually bringing that, because we all know lots of things that we're not actually presently aware of. I think that's an important thing as well. And this, I think we do need to understand that training or learning, call it whatever you will, is a control measure. If the control measure doesn't achieve its aims, it is ineffective, unethical, and inefficient. And that's it. Whatever we do as safety professionals, if what we do doesn't work, I think we need to stop doing it. So I don't know if that adds anything to the.
That's a good challenge, because we're doing a lot, and then I know many people would say, we're doing a lot, but we're doing it really badly, or we're doing a lot, but what about all these huge amounts of data of people around the world being harmed or killed through their work?
I
Um,
think, sorry, Christian, I think one of
yeah.
the points here to understand is that people are hurt or not based on what you do, not what you say you're going to do.
Hmm.
People are hurt or not, and it makes no difference whether you have a certificate or not. Both legally, there might be a one less zero on some fine or something if you've given somebody training. But if I train you to do it this way, but actually we do it the opposite way, ultimately people may or may not get hurt, and we haven't suitably and sufficiently managed the risk, which is ultimately what we're after. So anyone who believes the certificate either protects people or the organization, I'd love to have a discussion, because it's just not true.
Same as a yellow sign.
Well, exactly. So it comes back to, you know me, Christian. I'm interested in ethicality.
Hmm.
And I think it's all ethics. Everything that anyone said now, you can take back to ethics. I know I'm a bit of a broken record in that respect. But as a professional, which I think that we have the opportunities to be professional. We don't always take them, but we have the opportunities. I think to be a professional, right at the beginning of it, right at the root of it is are we actually providing a professional service for our clients, or actually is it just are actually working for ourselves rather than the clients? A principal aspect of being a professional, in my understanding of a professional, is that it must provide a service that adds value to the society that it serves. And there are lots of discussions that we have about whether we should do this theory or that theory. But ultimately, what I believe is the most important thing is if that we must add value. If we don't add value, it's an abuse of power. It's an abuse of an ability to influence without actually influencing according to the expectations of society. And I think there's quite a lot of work to be done. And I'm always working on myself as well. I'm not saying like I'm brilliant, everyone's rubbish, because that's just not true. It's a constant, if we have that attitude of service, does it work? No, well, don't do it. Okay, because we're not actually serving. And I think that's the starting point for me anyway.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah. Lots to unpack there. Chris, you got your hand up. How you doing?
I'm good, Christian. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I missed the first like 10 minutes because something happened. So apologies, but I'm here now. Just actually, hopefully useful to chip in here. If anyone doesn't know where I'm from or what Make UK do, we're a trade body for the manufacturing industry, and one of the many things we do is provide training in the area of EHS. And I just think it's interesting the change that we've seen and we've in some way driven over the last, I don't know, 5, 10 years, no, 5 years, let's call it. And that is that, when I started in this sort of role I'm in now, people thought, so we sell a lot of training to give you context. And people thought training in the EHS space was, yeah, okay, it's a 1-day risk assessment course, it's a 5-day fire course, whatever. Do it, tick a box, give us a certificate, right? And our people are, I don't even think they use the word competent, but trained. And so we've ticked a box, we've done what's legally required. And of course, as we all know, the legal requirement's competency, not training. So what we are, where we're coming from now, and we're getting some traction with this, is, if you look at what training is, it's about changing the behavior of someone to do something they weren't doing before. Otherwise, what's the point of it? Okay, you can increase knowledge, but what are you going to do with it, as people have said already? And so it's just 3 straightforward, simple things. So it's about, for me and us, it's about content. So really good, insightful, up-to-date content. That's obvious. So that's number 1. Secondly, you've got to be able to test that training that you've given in some way. What I mean by test is there's various different things you can do, we all know, but has someone understood what you've just given them and told them? So that's part 2. None of that is mind-blowing. Everyone knows that already. What we've really then said to people is, okay, think about why you're training people. What do you want them to do differently? And just a simple example, like a risk assessment course. What do you want them to do differently? And of course, people don't always know the answer to that. Well, I would suggest the answer is you want them to do a risk assessment that's good. Okay, and there's lots more leading on from that, I know, but basically that's what you want people to do. But what companies fail to do, in my experience, is to actually check, okay, you've passed an assessment, but are you actually utilising and using the skills that you've been given? 6 months later, how many risk assessments have you done, and are they any good? So when we put a training program together for an organisation, and I'm going to use the word suggest, that people do a follow-up afterwards. What has the actual impact of this training been on the business? And I know that's not mind-blowing new stuff, but you wouldn't believe, or you probably would believe, the number of big organisations that don't do it, and they're still in this box ticking position of, we've done the training, that's all we want to know. So we're trying to push this, increasing competency and ongoing improvement, whatever you want to call it. But, with some companies, great, that's what they're interested in. Others are just like, we don't really know what you're talking about. We just want to tick a box, thank you. And they'll literally tell you that. So, yeah, just my insight. I don't know if that's useful, helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I mean, what's interesting to me already is that we're kind of thinking about things in a couple of buckets. One is the bucket of sort of looking out externally. In other words, there are perceptions, or there are misperceptions, or there are challenges around, how we're perceived and how we can add value or not, and how we go about doing it, and so on. And then there's this kind of internal bucket of what are the functional things that we need to do, and how can we improve upon those, and so on. So I'm starting to look at it in those 2 buckets to start so far. But no, thank you. Daniel, how are you doing today?
I'm very well. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Good stuff. I think nobody's right, nobody's wrong on what's been said already. But I think it's very easy to think about things from your own perspective and your own level of experience. What we've got to remember is that all of us as professionals started somewhere. Some of us started with degrees, some of us started without. But those who learn on the job and become safety professionals can become some of the best safety professionals, because they understand the actual work. And that's the important thing that we can't overlook here. We really must put a lot of emphasis on competence, experience, as well as education. Those people may go on to get the qualifications, they may get the degrees, they may get the chartership, etc., but somebody who comes out of university with a degree in safety or something similar may have no industrial experience. So putting that person in charge of safety then becomes a risk. So we have to accept all levels of qualification and experience and understand that there's room for everybody. And we as professionals who have had the opportunity to have both have a duty or an obligation to ensure that those who come behind us learn from our experience, and we mentor them, we help them, we assist them, we coach them, whatever you want to call it. But I think it's incumbent on all of us to actually support the development of the future of our profession.
And how well would you say that we are doing that at the moment?
I think outside organizations, not particularly well. I think there are lots of different schemes that you can get accreditations. There is lots of training out there. You can get your skills updated. But I think organizations, large organizations, fortunately like my own, we do take it seriously and we work hard on making sure that those who are coming through the ranks actually stay within our business. Because the last thing you want to do is train somebody up, get them to a place of competence, and then they go somewhere else and take that experience elsewhere. Yeah. Yes, brilliant for them. And if somebody does that, I'm always happy to support anybody I've worked with to move on to bigger and better things. Ideally, we would like to keep them within our business because we want that experience. We want that chain of people coming through who can take on the senior positions in time.
Mm. And it's reminding me of the session we did with Laura, and some of the discussion was about, I've got this qualification, but I can't get a job because people are looking for experience. And I think Laura's feedback was, yeah, people are looking for experience, so you need to go out and try and get some work experience, commercial experience, industrial experience, or whatever it is, in addition to your qualification. So I think you're kind of echoing that point, I guess. Yeah. Amy, how you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. And thank you to all for joining us today. I just want to preface this discussion that I'm no EH&S professional. However, I've designed and delivered plenty of leadership learning conferences in the Chief Information Officer, Security Officer, and latterly Chief Health and Safety Officer space. And what my findings were, and not just here in the UK, but Europe and North America, was that very often EHS exists in this echo chamber. For me, that is, fundamentally dangerous. It's looking at how safety can be embedded throughout the organization. Now, that is no mean task. I believe that safety can be, a business catalyst, and it needs to be embedded into that company mindset. But that requires a new skill set amongst the EHS profession. So how you convince, engage, and put forward those business proposals to those who have the money to invest in what you're doing. The ramifications of it, you can reduce the company costs, you can increase productivity, enhance employee engagement and retention, and of course adhere to those compliance and regulations. So it really is more about those strategic business imperatives and perhaps those softer skills which can be learned and utilized to really make EH&S embedded within the mindset of the organization. And that's where I see the true change happening. EHS is not simply a bolt-on that's regarded as the poor relation, but it's seen as the business driver that leads to competitive advantage.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm fully with you on that perspective. And I suppose that's kind of where I was trying to get to with kind of, we've got some outward stuff and we've got some inward stuff. And you used quite a delicate phrase. I can't remember what you said now, but introspective maybe, or something like that. I was going to raise, are we doing too much navel gazing, and be a little bit more direct? But I do think there that we have to, we've got to sort of get our SHIT together, but we've also got to be looking outwards and figuring out, what do our organisations need from us, and how can we deliver on that? And are we putting ourselves in the right position to be able to do that? So yeah, definitely agree on that point.
Thank you.
Christian.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, got you.
Right. All right. I think for me, this part is quite important. I would like to re-emphasize on the part of training. Training is a very, very important item as part of the SHE management procedures, in every organization, both medium and high risk organizations, even probably down to the low risk sectors. Yeah, but the thing about training is that for me, this is something that I have been able to implement in the energy sector, and it has worked. Is being able to, before carrying out those trainings or before those trainings have been approved by management, it's important we understand what the issue is on ground. Some organization might just go ahead and say, okay, let us train, to ensure HSE presence in these company we are working at, but they might actually fail to understand the fact that we need to know what are the issues on ground. For a previous role, I was opportune to be part of. First of all, I discovered that almost every month we keep having incidents as a result of a lost time incident and even third party incidents. So basically, what did I do? So at that point in time, what I did was to identify that I discovered the fact that workers fail to understand that unsafe situations need to be identified and reported. You know, and so at that point in time, I had to carry out the training on hazard identification. These actually gave me the opportunity to break down these the requirements of reporting hazards, into steps, and they let the technical team understand the risk involved when these are not reported. And I also discovered that before any operational task, there should be effective implementation of the two bus stop system. That system sometimes could be taken advantage of. Do we really need to talk about these tasks we are doing, especially for major project activities? Especially now we have a renewable energy project everywhere in the world on a globally, and a record has shown that there've been incidents in that sector. As we regards to renewable energy projects. So these are issues that should be sorted out. Having an effective two bus stop system, and also, before carrying out those trainings, we need to understand that these are the situations on ground, these are the incident related issues, and these are the topic we need to focus on in these training. So I think for the part that training should be focus based, carry out probably a brief observation or investigation to understand what are the trainings topic we need to communicate to this team. I'm sure on a global scale, this will help to probably reduce the amount of incidents, especially in the area of energy sector, now that we are moving from a carbon to a decarbonized environment. So for me, I think that's key. Now, it's important because by the time we do this, it actually shows the level of HSC in professional improvement, because a lot of people now see the value of HSC and want to key into HSC matters. So it gives a positive impression, for an HSC professional, and sets a level of improvement in that area, because organizations will want to understand that we need to take safety first. We need to consult HSC probably team or organizations to ensure that we do this. So it sets a level of HSC improvement, in the area of safety and of course health and environmental matters. Thank you.
Good stuff. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Phil, you got your hand up again. Do you want to come back in?
Yeah, I'm. It's picking up, especially on things that Amy's just been talking about, and about we're living in a bit of a bubble within our professions, and I'm just pondering and thinking out aloud: are we the only profession that seems to be insisting you have to have experience to become a health and safety professional? I don't really have any experience before I moved into health and safety. I seem to have done all right. But a bit more about that bubble. Something I do notice, especially on LinkedIn, and emails I receive from people within the profession, but not my organisation, is the amount of initials that people put after their names. Nobody else seems to put initials after the names of various institutions they belong to. I stopped doing that years and years ago, with the only exception is my CV. But I just thought, what a complete embarrassment sometimes when you get an email from somebody who's got like 53 letters after the name that you think they're meaningless to people outside the bubble we're living in. So, I think we, as a profession, we need to do an awful lot as individuals and I think we do need to transform our profession. And in particular, having that experience of the shop floor of operational activity. My background's EHO, and that's a direct entry profession. Doing your degree, you don't need to work as a chef. You don't need to work on a lathe. You don't need to work in a shop before you can work as an EHO, providing advice, guidance, and enforcement in a kitchen, in a shop, or things like that. So. Yeah, I really think we need to think differently and have a different mindset to move our profession forward and get taken more seriously as a profession. to engage with people. And I think it was Amy again that said about embedding what we do as business as usual, not as a bolt on, and so people don't see it as a bolt on.
To what extent, Phil, would you say, and I'm interested in other people's views on this as well, we're sort of in a bit of a chicken and egg situation here, and we're kind of a bit stuck maybe, because can we get the perception and the viewpoints of non-safety people where we need them to be without doing that work and improving first? But can we have the space and the time and the resources and the support to improve unless we improve the perception?
It's a chicken and egg situation. You can't have a chicken or an egg first. You need to do everything at the same time. I really value my NEBOSH NGC. That was what really got me started in the health and safety side of things. I think it's a really, really good and valuable qualification, but not necessarily as a safety professional, but as somebody who works in safety or safety touches what they do. And maybe I'll just add that to be a safety leader, do you need to have any health and safety qualifications? To run a safety business, do you need any health and safety qualifications? To be a health and safety director? What stage in your career development do you stop being a practical health and safety person and just become a manager?
Maybe we should ban the word safety. Often,
well,
I know this is called the Safety Roundtable, but that's because it's for safety professionals. But sometimes the word safety just instantly turns people off.
It does, but it also is a way of getting people to view your content because people understand safety more readily than. And I think it's something that a couple of people like James McPherson as well, he's always banging on quite rightly. I agree with him that we should see ourselves as risk professionals rather than safety professionals. And going back to, probably banging on too much about being an EHO, but you see a wider variety. You see from a wider perspective. You have the 5 pillars of environmental health, so you can see how safety impacts on food safety, how it impacts on community and housing, disease control, and bringing everything together. Whereas sometimes I think that you can become very much in danger just focusing on the safety without seeing the wider strategic picture as well. But having said that, I'm called a head of health and safety. I don't just cover safety, I cover a lot of other different areas, but people understand the term health and safety. So chicken and egg. Somebody provide the answer for me, please. I'll shut up now and let somebody else speak.
Thanks, Phil. Lee, do you want to come in next? So you got your hand up. Simon, I'll get you back in a sec.
Yeah, I think we're in danger of really isolating ourselves if we aren't careful of how we present ourselves to companies or as a service. And I think training in a lot of ways needs to be identified in 2 schools of thought. And I think one of them is, if a company asks you or you're working for a company to train somebody, are you training somebody really in the realms of your professionalism and responsibility to transfer that over to them? Or should you take ownership and say, no, I'm not going to train you. That's what I get paid to do. That's what I'm a professional in. You don't need to do that particular training on risk assessments or things like that. That's what I will do for you, and I will communicate as I'm trained to do to your people to make sure that they understand that. I know that's a form of training, but what I'm trying to say is that we've got to be careful that when we're working for businesses, we don't transfer the responsibility where inexperience can really play a key role in decision making where safety is concerned, when us as professionals should actually draw a line in the sand and say, hey, that's my job, I should do that. I don't need to train you there. That's what I get paid to do. That's what I spent 20 years doing. Why should I give it to somebody who's on the shop floor? And I get awareness training and behavioural training and stuff like that. But I think there really is a line in the sand where professionals and people who are employed as health and safety or occupational health and safety need to say, no, there's no such training there. That's what I do. And I think as well as drawing that line in the sand, it's that if we just viewed on being safety, health, or environmental, if we isolate those things, and I agree that the broader perspective of what that gentleman has just said is absolutely massive. And for us to understand our own ownership, I also think to understand that broader scope, we have to draw a line in the sand on what we actually do train and stop being the answers to everybody and every because as a safety professional, you've always deemed in 20 years I've been doing it that we should be the answer to everything, and we're not. And I think that's also a mistake in training. We think we're giving the answers, and I think a lot of people have alluded to that today, that we've given the answers because we've delivered the training, everything's okay. And I don't think I think there's a line in the sand that us as professionals need to say, no, this is what I will do, and I will deliver that service for you. There is no training for that other than be aware there is a risk. This is the risk. Be aware here, there is a risk. That is the risk. That is the hazard. That is the control measure. And I think that's a fine line in the sand instead of passing that responsibility over to people maybe who don't value its importance as significantly as we do.
Lots to unpack there. Three things I got from that. One is standing up for ourselves a bit, and I think actually, we by our very nature, what we do, we are kind and compassionate and helpful people, and we want to help people. But actually, sometimes that means you can get a bit run over if you don't sort of stand your position a bit. The bit around, that line in the sand as to what we would and wouldn't train, I think is really interesting. And what came to mind to me was if you're the accountant, which you've got to have training for and experience for and so on and so forth, you don't go and train people how to do
your job,
all of what you do, but you do train them on how to fill their expenses forms in properly. But you'd never go much further than that. So I think there's an interesting discussion there about, as you say, how much are we actually cutting off our nose to spite our face by trying to teach other people to do stuff rather than us doing it ourselves. The third thing I would say is, and I use this analogy a lot, you talked about, we're expected to try and solve. I think another positioning piece here is we need to be better at, firstly, internally understanding and accepting this position, and secondly, then talking about it to our colleagues. But health and safety professional is a GP, it's not a surgeon. So you've got to be able to diagnose the problem, but you shouldn't be expected to be treating necessarily the problem. Yes, there are some problems that you can treat, with your antibiotics equivalent, using the analogy. But there are a lot of things where actually you need to call a surgeon in, and you need to pass it on to somebody that's even more specialist than you. And I think again that's something there where there's both that internal angle of, are we setting ourselves up as a profession to fail because we're trying to do too much? And there's also that external angle of, are we explaining what actually we can and can't do properly well enough in the first place?
I think to extend on that as well, as an health and safety professional, I always never try to forget. I mean, knowledge-based confidence is a key for any company to have that sort of person in the business, or to be really confident in your knowledge. Knowledge-based confidence, a very good defensible position. You're classed as a professional, but I also think that I was in a situation where this technical sort of piling, even though piling itself is not an overly complicated task, but when it's in close proximity to a railway, the business still expected me to understand all the risks associated to that railway. And I said, I can't sign a risk assessment off without, and this is the key for me as being probably seeing CDM develop over these last 15 years, especially the last 10 years, is that we should never forget that we should be a conduit for the people to get round the table at the right time with the right skills and the right knowledge. So therefore, when we are signing safe systems of works off, or safe operating procedures, or technical information which Network Rail may have, or the energy profession may require, we have those right people around that table to say we've made the correct decisions. And as an health and safety profession, I think that we should never forget that in terms of us being CDM, born and bred, and that's our bread and butter stuff, and risk assessments and PQQs are everything that we embed ourselves in. We should never forget that people keep people safe. And when people keep people safe, they have to be around the right table with the right information, with the right skills and the right knowledge. And we should be a conduit to that. And that allows us to keep people safe on a common playing field.
Yeah, and we're adding value and doing something that maybe other people can't, and bringing perspective and enabling things. Yeah, I like that. I like that. Simon, you wanted to come back in.
Yeah, I just want to disagree with Phil. So Phil, I know you were looking for an argument. Ready where you are. Ready where
Here we go.
Okay, right. So if you understand that health and safety professionals' duty is to serve the public, making the public aware of different levels of qualification and professional standing is vital to help a person or group with an inexpert view understand who they should choose. I mean, it would be absurd to say that doctors don't need formal qualifications to do their job. It's ridiculous to say that that lawyers shouldn't say, and I don't know what the memberships they have in the legal system. It would seem ridiculous. Now, I do understand that there are issues with 10, 12, whatever memberships. I get that, and I think that's a fair point. I really do. But we as a profession need to educate our customers, i.e. society, that there are different levels or standards of health and safety professionals. And a few people have alluded to that in different ways and different competencies and whatnot. But ultimately, if you start from a position of service, giving your customers a better understanding of what is the right standards for them, I think that's a vital aspect of providing a service.
I'm not saying we don't need qualification. I think we need a different form of qualifications, and I'm a big proponent of a degree-led qualification route. Just one thing. I serve my organisation first, because they're the one who pays me. I don't serve the general public. Indirectly, I serve the general public by keeping our residents and colleagues safe, but maybe that's another discussion. Is should we actually see ourselves as serving the general public first and foremost before we serve our company or organisation we're working for?
Well, if we're chartered, it's a primary element of being chartered that you're first and foremost. It's not quite as, this then that. But if you look at it, to be a chartered anything, the chartered authorities say that your primary duty is to serve the needs of society.
With the organisation you're working for.
And as an ex-EHO, what I would say is obviously you've got your primary duty is then as a public servant. So
that's if you're working as a public servant. I've never worked as a local authority as an EHO.
Oh, right. Okay. All right. But I think what you're saying is a fair point, that the needs of your employer are obviously very important. But would it not also be true that if, I'm sure it isn't the case, your employer was undertaking work in a way that could lead to harm to others outside of your direct role, that you would have a duty to actually, and I'm not saying your company would, but if your company was acting in a way that could cause harm to others and not mitigating that risk, that you would have a professional duty that is over and above your duty of fiduciary duties to your employer.
No, that I think that's slightly an incorrect way of saying it, because an organisation that you work for has got a duty to protect the people who may be impacted by whatever you're doing anyway. So that's part and parcel of what you do as an organisation. So you do protect people who may be impacted on what work or services or products, whatever you're providing.
But if they wasn't, would there be...
That wouldn't exist. I'm British based, so that doesn't exist within the UK under the framework of the Health, Safety, Work, etc. Act.
Right. Okay.
So by very nature of your organisation, you're helping to protect your people who you work for, whether it be offering goods or services, whether it's your colleagues or people who can be impacted by what you do. That's intrinsically part of role as a company or an organisation, health and safety professional. It's not different as in a bolt-on. You can protect the public as well if you want. That's an intrinsic part of any organisation that operates.
Okay, well, we don't want to take up any more time, but if you ever want to ask this further, it'd be lovely, Phil.
I'll send you. I'll DM you on LinkedIn.
Yeah. All right.
Phil, you should have Simon onto your soon-to-be launched podcast, Phil, and have a good
In
chat.
fact, that's a good idea. Sorry, I'll shut up now. I won't use your platform to publicise myself.
No. I don't mind about that. Don't worry about that at all. Don't worry about that at all. Andrew, coming back in. We've got about 5 minutes left, guys.
Okay. It'd be good because if we recap on the questions that we make ourselves better or improve our services to our client base, which is a lot of people touched on to it. Amy, I think, did it the best out of all of it, I think, to be honest with you. We don't separate safety from the 3 pillars, production, quality, and safety. They're the whole of the company. What are we providing to that company and what is their return on investment for us is what we need to look at. And there are varying roles within the company as you move up and down the hierarchy on the needs of those individuals. So yeah, when does a safety person become a manager and start organizing budgets and everything else? I've got a meeting tomorrow with a company, and their question they're asking me when I go in is, how do we change this whole safety culture within their organization, what they do? My first answer to that is safety culture is not alone in itself. Safety culture is part of the bigger organization. It is part of the way they operate, is part of their ethos, is part of their mission statement. So that question itself is incorrect. We need to look at the way we operate in order to get the best benefit from what we're providing and get a return on investment for that company. That's just my final point. And we can do that by their roles and responsibilities and what services we're providing it, whatever skill set you've got to offer your client. So if we change the terminology from qualified and competent to what skill set are you offering the client, that may be a better approach to it, because it won't be looking at it as more of a hierarchy, because you could have 4 PhDs in the room who will specialize in different subjects and offer something different. So we need to identify what we're offering to the consumer. That's my opinion on how we can move forward.
Yeah, thank you. I like that. Thank you very much for sharing. It's certainly, deliberately it was quite an open question that I set today, and I was hoping, like it did, that we would kind of go off and in different directions, and we would see kind of what you guys felt about it. I suppose what seems to be a consensus is that we're not the finished article, that there's lots of work we can do. There might be some disagreements on what exactly we need to focus on, but I think we're all, by taking part in this discussion, we're all showing that we're keen to help move the profession forward, to make the world safer, to help all these stakeholders that we've spoken about. So I suppose the next question is, what can we do to facilitate that, and how can we play our own part as well, both in terms of what we do within our own organisations, as well as, of course, through the wider safety and other business and organisation communities as well. So conscious of time, so I'm going to wrap things up, but thank you all for taking part. As I said at the start, this is the last one of these in 2024, so thank you for those of you that have joined the sessions as the year has gone on. We're going to be starting next year with a couple of forward-looking events. We've got one about kind of what's the year ahead in safety, and then we're going to have a health and safety legal landscape for 2025 update as well in January. So do join us for those. If I don't speak to you beforehand, have a great festive period, and thank you for joining again today. Cheers, guys.
Thanks for joining us on the Safety and Risk Success podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit follow and do share on social media. Does anyone you know spring to mind as a great guest, even yourself? If so, please contact us on podcast@slipsafety.co.uk. See you next week for another episode.